Hello and welcome to Awakened with Lea, the next chapter. I'm your host, Lea, and this show is about bringing to the forefront diverse guests who have experienced adversity and major or minor transitions in life so that we can provide our viewers with courage, confidence, and tangible tools to navigate any challenge in life with the lived experience and wisdom of our guests. Hello and welcome to Awakened with Lea, the next chapter. Today, I am honored to have Lisa Lopez with us. Welcome, Lisa. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. So, Lisa, you are the founder of Live Happy Coaching, and you are a happiness coach.
I am.
And I understand today is what?
It's International Day of Happiness.
Wonderful. So we are going to be bringing a lot of happiness to our viewers today. And I understand you're going to be sharing some of your earlier experiences that really shaped who you are today. And I honor you for being so vulnerable to share your experiences with us in hopes to support others who may be feeling the same way right now.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's interesting because I'm a happiness coach. And so, people always just think, wow, she's just this happy person. She's had this perfect life. She's just like, over the top with her cheerfulness and perpetually smiling. And the reality is that was definitely a long journey in the making. And, there was a time in my life not too long ago, honestly, where I was just completely depressed. My family had spiraled out of control. We were a family much like probably many of your viewers. I was a mom of two young boys, my husband and I, busy parents, right? Crazy, doing everything, the soccer, the basketball, running all over, volunteering, working full-time jobs, just trying to keep our head above water. And we had this family. It was really busy, but our home was always filled with love and laughter. It wasn't until my oldest son, it was about the summer of his 8th grade year, where things totally started to change. I mean, he started to talk different, act different, dress different. I mean, he was our firstborn, so we figured, he's a teenager, and that's what teenagers kind of do, right? But then the behavioral problems started. He started to hang out with a whole new circle of friends, none of which we recognized. He started to get in trouble at school. He started to get in fights in school. And it was really a really hard time. I mean, pretty soon we didn't really recognize our child anymore. I mean, we used to walk in the room when he was little and his face would just light up, but at this point in his life, he would avoid eye contact. He wouldn't want to have anything to do with us. And the tension in our home was at an all-time high, as I'm sure like any of you or any of your parents out there can relate to. Your child is just so distant from you. You're really confused about what's happening and how do I reach him.
And I can imagine at first you think that it's just a phase.
Totally. I mean, you hear about, we've been teenagers. We know we were kind of crazy. And, the same with him. We're like, it's just a phase. And, we didn't know, we didn't recognize. And then what happened was on the morning of my son's 15th birthday, we get this phone call really early in the morning. We answer the phone and it's juvenile hall. He had been arrested. So we had thought, we thought our son was sleeping in his room. He had snuck out, gotten arrested, and we were just devastated. We were like, as you can imagine, how could this have happened to us? We're this family, we're happy, we're in PTA, we're doing everything right.
Yeah.
How could this happen to us? And so what ensued was just this whole complete collapse of our family. I mean, we as parents felt total shame, total guilt. how could we have let our child down in this way? I mean, we were just blown away. We couldn't get our bearings because we had now no control of our child anymore.
Yeah, and at that point, it's so hard to look within and say, I'm doing the best that I can as a human being to parent my children, and yet these things do happen. And so it's by default we go into guilt and shame. And so now we have that stress on top of us, guilt and shame, and realizing this isn't just a phase. And so there's a lot of moving parts to that, a lot of emotions going on in that moment. So what was your first step forward in breaking through some of those, the guilt and shame that was going on for you?
Yeah, when you're in mourning, and that's what's happening for our family. We were in mourning, we were in grief. It's very hard to see a clear path forward. I mean, I would literally, I'm an ultrasound technologist previously. I would literally cry in between each of my clients. Like I just couldn't, I had to keep going to work. I had to keep being a mom to my younger son, but it just the pain and the shame and the loss of my child in that way, I was just grieving all the time. And also the awareness around when something like that happens, that you didn't really know your child. And that's so painful to think about. I mean, my son would hide his gun outside our bushes and come and have dinner with us. He was living two completely different lives, and to think that we weren't able to see that or what was happening with him and that he was in crisis was really, really hard for us to accept. So one, it's just that first step of accepting where you're at, trying to step away from the judgment, and learning to have a little bit of compassion for your situation, and it's hard, especially when it's your child. So that was kind of step number one, is just sitting with the situation and trying to be okay with not being okay.
And that's a
Yeah.
very important message. It's about accepting where we're at. It doesn't mean we have to like it, but accepting where we're at gives us a place to actually start to move forward towards the self-compassion. And from there, that self-compassion leads to a clearer mind of what now.
Absolutely. I mean, you can only have as much compassion for others as you have for yourself. And so that's a really powerful message that I just want to share out of that experience. So it started with me getting to the point where I said, okay, now what's next? Now, in his situation, we made the very difficult decision. We negotiated with the courts and we ended up sending him to a behavioral modification program in the middle of the desert. So this is a very strict school for kids, troubled kids. And as a result of that, we didn't have any contact with him for 2 months other than with letters. So literally we're trusting that this place is going to help our child. We send him away. Now my home, my son doesn't have a brother. We don't have a son. And it was just this vacancy that was happening, like this vacancy in our heart, vacancy, physical vacancy in our home. Everything's completely changed. We send him away. We have no idea what's going on with him other than what they tell us, which we don't, you know what I mean? You just have to trust that these people are reputable. And, he has to learn to, he's been brainwashed. He was brainwashed. He thought he was a different person. So he had to learn rules again, earn his shoes, super strict. So the whole time we're like, what's going on? We don't know what's happening. He enters intensive therapy and life coaching. And in this program, we were required to do the exact same program. So the parents go through intensive therapy and coaching, just like the kids. So you're doing it together. So that was really the first step in the direction of our healing of our family, is being introduced to life coaching.
Wow. And
Yeah.
so what did you learn from the experience, um, of where, you know, at the core, what was going on with your son that helped you move away from shame and guilt?
Yeah, he was, I think the thing was is that I stopped looking at him like he was broken, like there was something wrong with him. When you hear this all the time, oh, my son's he's being bad, or they're doing bad things, right? So I learned to not see him as a child who was bad, but a child who was suffering. And that shift was, one, hard as a parent to accept, to know my child suffering, but it allowed us to really see his vulnerability, and see how he needed to be nurtured in a different way. And I think that's another really important message, is that each child is different. And when they're having these outbursts or things are happening, it's not that they want to be bad kids. They're just lost. They're just suffering. They just, they don't know what to do. And so they gravitate to whoever is going to show them a direction that feels easy for them, that feels like that's something that might be able to, comfort them in some way. So that was a big thing for me, is seeing that, and also seeing what was happening in our family. As a parent, when kids do things like that, it's very easy to say it's all about them. But the reality is it's not. It's about the family.
So it sounds like allowing each child the space it's unconditional love, allowing the child the space to express, what's going on with them, however they express it, but accepting it. And instead of putting blame, we are looking at it from a different perspective, which allows even more space to find solutions to potential challenges.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So we went into the life coaching. I had never heard of life coaching at that point. It was a completely different type of, modality. I never heard of it. And so what happened was, it was like taking blinders off. I was blown away by the experience. I never knew that this type of life existed. Learning to create a family, a values-based family, learning to acknowledge when you had these limiting beliefs that were guiding your decision making. Learning it was like learning a new language, or like arriving in the land of Oz. That's how it felt for me. I was just, oh my gosh, I can't believe this exists, and why doesn't every man, woman, and child have access to this, to life coaching? Why is it this like kind of hidden secret that people don't know about? I mean, we're talking more than 10 years ago, right? So it literally transformed our entire lives, as a family. But even more importantly, what I realized, now, was that my child's crisis literally saved our lives, because we were introduced to the transformational power of life coaching.
Yeah, it's amazing how adversity can be a gift. And with life coaching, myself included, is when we don't know that there is anything else that exists, we can't make any changes. We don't have that awareness. So, we continue life thinking everything's okay the way it is, because that's our perspective. And it's with life coaching, it's like you said, all of a sudden, what you believed to be true is not necessarily the truth. And we uncover different perspectives, which opens up opportunities and really solutions to situations that arise in our circumstances on a daily basis, and we're able to solve them in a healthier way. And we know how to respond to situations as opposed to reacting because we're looking at it from a holistic view. So it sounds like that's exactly what started happening for the healing process for your family.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the thing is it gave us permission to create the family that we needed to have that worked for us. And before that, and I'm sure many of your viewers are going to relate to this, but we bring with us all our stuff. We raise our kids like we were raised, or you bring that all that familia stuff with you into your relationships, into your life, into your parenting, and there is a lot of that that's good, but you know what, it's not the same family. And so you can't take what happened for you and then superimpose it on this other family and think it's going to work exactly the same way. It's different. There's different people involved. There's different personalities. There's different needs. And so life coaching, like I said, really gave our family permission to co-create a family that was, based in values we decided for our family, what worked for us. It didn't have to look like anybody else's family. And that really changed the landscape of our relationships. This was no longer a hierarchy. We were in relationship with each other. And so that alone was a big, pivot into having the family that really loved each other, worked together, communicated successfully for each other, and then also understanding, how can I apply that to my own life as an adult? Where am I stopping myself? Why am I feeling these blocks in my life? What's happening for me? So like I said, it just individually, we all grew, and then we came together as a family. So it was just honestly, and then I fell in love with life coaching. I was on a mission. I need to make sure everybody knows about life coaching. I was telling all my family, I'm going to become a coach. I'm telling all my friends, like, you need to know that there's this other option, and you don't have to feel stuck. You don't have to feel powerless. You can have the life that you deserve. So it was just this catalyst into the life I live and love today. And now my children, my son leads men's groups. My other child's the same way. It's like crazy how it's really affected everybody.
That's how powerful it really is. And it's like I said, you can't change what you don't know. So you were, from what happened with your son, you were literally introduced to that there is another side to the hopelessness that someone might be feeling right now, or the darkness. There is light, there is hope, there is possibility for change. And so, what beliefs did you have to shift in order to start to come to these realizations?
That I had to have all the answers. Number one, the biggest transformation came when I could step away from my ego and honestly say, I don't know what the answer is, but I can help. Maybe together we can figure it out. And when you bring that type of vulnerability to a relationship, it takes your relationship to a whole nother level.
Yeah, because you're meeting them where they're at.
Yeah. I mean, you're human, and you're giving them permission to be human too. I think the number one thing that really is toxic in a family or relationships in general is expectations. Just throw them out the window, friends. Expectations. They're just, and when it comes to parenting, it comes to the family unit, it's all these unspoken expectations that you have for each other. Guess what? That person doesn't even know that you want that from them because they can't read your mind, right? So I think that was one of the big things is, in my family, we really learned to step away from expectations, and we started to create agreements with each other. Agreements where everybody comes to the place where they say, what can I actually do? What can I actually deliver in this relationship, right? And so that was a big, big deal for our family as well.
So it sounds like very high on the communication level of, like you said, meeting everyone where they're at. having a sit down and everybody communicating what their needs are and how everybody can support each other, as opposed to being, codependent on, I need you to complete me and fill this void that I'm not communicating, but working together as a family. And it sounds like that also played out in other areas of your life.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so it sounds like the acceptance from all the new learnings from the life coach really helped the healing process for you.
Yeah, it was a long journey. And I think there's still parts that are still being healed as life is, it's just a lot. There was a lot. I mean, I want you to think about that. My son was removed from our home and things that he went through around that. And then us coming back together and now integrating our learning. And I remember them saying to me, it's so funny. They'd say, Mom, it's like you're speaking a different language now. Where'd my mom go? Where'd my mom go? All stressed out, crazy, running from place to place. Like, I wasn't that person anymore. I was not that person anymore. It was like I had shed the cocoon and now I was this butterfly, but they were so not used to us just using language like values or purpose or feelings, talking about feelings more, and using that as a barometer of success in our family, right? So there was a lot of stuff going on that we had to shed that old way of thinking, and that took some time and there was resistance around it. But we never stepped away from it. That's the thing. You parents out there, you have to be strong. Or just as individuals, people, we learn these new behaviors. We want to default to the old behaviors because that's what's comfortable. That's never going to bring you the growth and the transformation that you really seek. So you have to just keep with it, keep practicing it, keep doing it, keep learning, keep growing. And as my husband and I modeled that for our children, there is no other way. This is the way.
Yeah.
Then they started to say, oh my gosh, I see mom and dad are so happy in their lives. They're really such different people now. There must be something to that, and so then I would start hearing them talk to their friends and using similar language, encouraging them, saying things like, it's just in the moment. These feelings are going to pass. I'd hear my 13-year-old saying that to his friend. Don't worry, just stay focused right now. This is all you can control. Yes.
Leading by example.
Lead by example. They're rarely going to do what you say, but the impact of what you do,
yes,
is huge on your children.
Absolutely. I mean, the influences from our early days created, our whole belief system. We brought that into our family initially until you started with the life coaching and you realized that there is another way. But it sounds that it's also led you through a path of growth to the point where you were coming from a calm, peaceful place. And it when that's communicated, a lot of people are a lot more receptive to what we're saying. So that was a huge growth path for you, and you're leading by example with that calmness and peacefulness within you.
Yeah. And that calm really comes from recognizing that there is no fail. There is no fail. You're either going to do well like you had hoped to, or you're going to learn to grow from the experience. And then also really sitting in that growth and celebrating that, knowing that, yeah, it does feel a little uncomfortable when things don't go as planned. But there's also this beautiful opportunity to see things differently that maybe you didn't see before it went wrong, right? So I think that's where that fear of failure, that fear of, oh, I'm going to be a bad parent, or I'm going to do this wrong, or I'm going to, when you can lean into that fear and not be scared of it, then it really allows you to have that kind of patience and calm that you were describing.
Absolutely. And it's not being attached to any particular outcome. It's really being accepting for where we are in the moment, and that whatever circumstances arise is there for a purpose, even though we may not necessarily see it. And resistance to change is uncomfortable, but it's not impossible. And I always say that the, history doesn't have to repeat itself, and the past is the past. The future hasn't happened yet. So taking baby steps in the moment and reaching a place where we acknowledge our feelings, we don't push them aside. It's like you said, lean into the emotions. Look at what thoughts are we having that's causing that resistance. And it allows us to walk through that fear step by step.
Yeah, no, beautifully put. And that's exactly why I ended up being a happiness coach. Was, when I first got out of school, I was a coach to parents of troubled teens, right? So pay it forward. I want to help people navigate that situation with some type of grace, like help them do that. But I ended up being a happiness coach because I understand that if you want a happy life, if you want a sustainable happiness, then you need to work on your relationship with your unhappiness. So if you can be in partnership with that and not fear it, but embrace it as a beautiful, also another beautiful part of who you are, then you will allow that unhappiness to pass through you and you won't get stuck there. But when you don't see it as part of who you are, then you will put up incredible resistance to it, and you're going to experience unhappiness much longer. So that's why I'm so passionate about the work that I'm doing as a happiness coach, for that very reason.
That is a very powerful message. It's taking ownership for how we feel and not falling into codependency or being a victim to our circumstances or living life in resentment and anger and frustration. So it's once we take ownership for how we feel and work through that with support of like a coach, then we reach a point where that ends up playing out with all of our relationships in our life, because we're standing in our power. We're literally taking our power back by owning our whole being.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What would you say was the biggest lesson that you learned, and what message could you share with everybody?
I feel like the biggest lesson I learned really was that there is tremendous growth in crisis. You're not going to be able to avoid these things, but things are going to happen in your life that are incredibly painful, that really take you back, that you think that you will never recover from. But there's a gift in there. There's gift in there if you just allow yourself the opportunity to receive it. And so I think that would be one of my biggest messages, is just to recognize that. And I think we can reflect back on our lives and we know this is true. When you're in it, you don't think it is going to be a gift, but just like the example that I just shared with all of you, that it's, who would have thought my son being arrested would be this huge transformational catalyst to saving my family, saving our lives. And that the second take-home message is, if you want to have a happy family, you need to work on your own happiness. It does not work in any other way. You can give until you have nothing left, and there will be no guarantee that your family will be happy. The best thing that you can do is take care of yourself.
So and those are wonderful messages, but it really sounds uh like what you're trying to say is on the self-compassion part, allow yourself that moment to take a breath when something uncomfortable happens in our life, and changing the perspective like we spoke about earlier. It's about that it could potentially be something other than what we believe it is to be, so that we don't in that moment react to the circumstance as so detrimental, and just allowing ourselves that space to really absorb what's happening and take that pause, and also try to look at what could be right in that situation as opposed to what's wrong in the situation. And it might open ourselves up to a different perspective just long enough for us to stay in a calmer, happier space in that moment when we're trying to figure things out, as opposed to staying in that negative energy for a long period of time.
Yeah. Yes, beautifully put. Beautifully put. I always like to say, can you find that space inside of you where you're okay enough? Sometimes you just need to be okay enough,
Yeah.
enough to really anchor and say, I'm going to get through this.
And and that's really, really important, because I know from my personal experience, I always thought it had to be some big aha moment of some sort in order for anything to feel okay. So like I'll be happy when, not realizing that it we can actually keep it simple. It could be something as putting on some music and just sitting and waiting, and all of a sudden you get a good feeling in your stomach and a smile on your face. Just meet yourself where you're at, and start from there. And also, when we are in gratitude, looking for things that are right, then the momentum grows from there. So it's not that we don't have to wait till we have something manifested that we so strongly desire. We can actually feel happiness right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And also, I mean, just to add to that, is just that there is no bad emotion. I feel like people like to label things good and bad all the time. And then, of course, we act accordingly to that description. But the freedom comes in knowing there's no bad emotion. They're just emotions. They pass. Happiness passes just as well. We like happiness. It feels better in our body. There's a lot of benefits to happiness.
Wanted to hang around longer.
You wanted to hang around more than the other stuff. But
Yeah.
I think when you just have that awareness around that, this is just temporary. It's just an emotion, right? It's not dictating my entire life, right? That kind of thing, and staying in that moment like you're talking about. There's a lot of power in that. I think if people just were able to get that down, really understand that, really able to practice that would relieve a lot in people's lives.
And I think that is a fantastic starting ground, where we are ditching the labels. No more labels. There is no good, bad, right, wrong. It just is. And
it just is.
It just is.
It just is. We're so judgmental.
We are. Exactly.
We're very judgmental people. We all do it, but that's, I think, and then you won't experience the resistance, right? Because if you're constantly thinking this is bad to feel sad, or bad to feel angry or fear, then of course you're going to say, oh my gosh, this is bad. And you're going to try and bypass that emotion, right? And then you're going to try and be someone who you authentically are not, pushing those emotions down. Well, guess what, folks? They don't go away. They're going to pop up when you don't want them to. So do yourself a favor and just allow them to happen as they naturally occur.
Yeah, they will absolutely surface again. There's no question about it.
Oh my goodness. It's usually when you least want to deal with them. So.
Absolutely. It's a lot of times it's deceiving because we're able to show up as if everything's okay. And then we don't realize physically exhaustion, in our nutrition, why things are starting to happen. And it is those emotions that we didn't deal with. But if we were to say to ourselves, every single emotion that I have has a reason for it. There's a purpose for every emotion. And when we say there's a purpose for every emotion, we're not labeling it as good or bad. So we allow that opening to for discovery, right?
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true.
Well, there's been so many wonderful messages that you have provided all of us with today. And definitely a starting ground for releasing some of the guilt and shame that a lot of us as parents go through. So I really, really appreciate all of your wisdom that you shared and for sharing such personal experiences, in hopes to support others. So I am forever grateful to you and your wisdom as well. I certainly hope to see you on this show again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I mean, if I can help anybody, I'm always really grateful that for that opportunity. And I mean, I love that you said guilt, because I always say we birth two things as parents. We birth the actual baby, and then we birth guilt and shame. It just comes together.
100%.
But we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. And also, just, a final message is just to just know that we all have our stories, and even the brightest light, the happiest person has a story. And so knowing that we're all connected and have empathy for each other in that way, never look at somebody and think that they aren't suffering inside. You just never know. And so stepping away from judgment and really being compassionate, and not thinking that people don't need to be heard or seen just because they have a smile on their face, right? Sometimes that's the only thing that they can do, not to be crying all the time. So that was my story, right? So I hope people really take home that as well. It's just realizing we're all connected. We're all the same.
We are all connected. We are all the same. And for the viewers to know that you are not alone.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And to all my viewers, thank you so much for being here. And I look forward to sharing this space again with you next time.